If everyone start finding their seats, we'll get started here. We'll call this meeting of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners to order for Saturday, February 11th, 2017. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Drew. Lynn, would you call the roll of the commission, please? Here?
Here.
Here. Thank you, Lynn. And would County Advisory Board members stand and announce themselves, please? All right, thank you. Move to agenda item number 16, approval of the agenda. Chairman Wallace for possible action. The commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. Questions or comments on the agenda from the commission? Commissioner Drew?
Maybe just a quick reminder that we did table items 12 and 13 from yesterday at your call.
Thank you, Commissioner Drew. Further comments from the commission? Seeing none, it is an action item. I'll take it out for public comment. Public comment in Carson City. Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas.
No comment in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I'll bring it back to the commission for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve the agenda as presented with the following exception that items 12 and 13 that were tabled yesterday be at the call of the chair.
Second. I have a motion by Commissioner Johnston, or Vice Chairman Johnston, and a second by Commissioner McNinch to approve the agenda as presented with the exception of items 12 and 13 being at the call of the chair. Everyone understand the motion? I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Agenda item 17, member items, announcements, and correspondence. Chairman Wallace and Secretary Wosley, informational. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies of the exhibit file, Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record. Correspondence sent or received by Secretary Wosley may also be discussed. I'll start off one of the first things I have is I wanted to recognize DAG Harry Ward. This will be his last meeting for the Wildlife Commission, and we've appreciated his service, and it's nice to have a smiling face when we come to our meetings and a sportsman and working with us and helping us out. So thank you, Harry. And Secretary Wosley also recognized yesterday that the commission received a petition in regards to the bear hunt. I just wanted to recognize that again today since that's on our agenda today. And I've had some miscellaneous emails regarding all of it, and I do believe the commission has received those as well because we were all CC'd together from the department. And I think that's all I have. If any other commissioners have anything. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make the commission aware. A couple weeks ago, sitting at home, kind of fading into the evening, I guess, and I got a call, and it was basically a survey, and it had to do with trapping issues in Nevada. It had to do with wildlife contests, parts coming into the country, and it was I've been big on human dimension work. I've been big on trying to understand those processes, how that stuff, the science behind it, understanding it, and I appreciate it. I think it's a good way to go. However, with regards to this survey, and I will just say for the record, as it asked the questions, it gave me three options: yes, no, or unsure. I answered every question unsure because I wanted to find out what was going on all the way through the thing without creating my own bias. But I got to tell you that the survey itself, in my personal opinion, I felt very led down a certain path. And I think as we go through, I'm sure that it's intended for legislative purposes. And at some point, if we run into this during the legislature, I would strongly suggest that we keep it in the back of our mind and that we ask for those questions to be laid out in their entirety so that nobody's deceived by how those questions were asked. And in my opinion, they were pretty biased. People would be offended if there were surveys that were conducted that had an alternate twist, had a twist that they might disagree with. And I'll say for the record, everybody knows that I have concerns and issues, especially with trapping and the wildlife contest. So I probably share some of the concerns with whoever's conducting that survey. But the way that the questions were asked, I felt were fairly misleading, and I'd be curious to know how they set their questions up and if they followed a specific accepted standard for question development and application. So I just wanted to make the commission aware of that, and I'm sure that we'll be hearing more from it. So.
Thank you, Commissioner McNinch. Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, just maybe two quick questions. One to Commissioner McNinch and then one to Director Wosley. But Dave, was there anything on the phone call that indicated who was conducting the survey or for what purposes the survey was intended? And then to Director Wosley, are you aware of anything through the department or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service?
No, Commissioner Drew, certainly nothing we're aware of. This is the first I've heard of it. Nothing that the department's conducting, nothing I'm aware of, either through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or any of the professional human dimensions groups either.
It sounded like there was that it was coming out of Las Vegas. It had a Las Vegas area code, but the reason I prefaced my statements with, you know, I was kind of, it was pushing that 9 o'clock, and apparently I was fading out on the couch when the phone rang, and so I didn't mark it down, but I think it was, and again, I just don't recall 100%, but it did state the name of the company, and I think it was Clear or something. It was a survey group anyway. I wish I'd have been more on my toes. I just wasn't. It really caught me sleeping. It caught me off guard, and I didn't write them down. But it would. The questions led you down a certain path, and then they'd ask you your opinion. And I could see where, you know, people that had opposing or differing opinions could have done the same thing and come up with a different answer with their own twist to it. So.
Further commission comments, correspondence? Vice Chairman Johnston.
I just received this morning a letter from No Bear Hunt, Nevada. I know that's related to a specific agenda item, but I didn't see that the department was copied, so I forwarded that on to Suzanne so they could be part of the record.
Further commission? Director Wasley, do you have anything?
The one other item that I also mentioned yesterday during this agenda item was a letter I received from the Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association. There were 3 points in that letter. Number 1 was the membership was in full support of the black bear season. Number 2, they do not support the proposal to standardize the season prescriptions from the guideline discussion yesterday. And number 3, that they supported the mountain lion seasons and harvest limits. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. Anything further from the commission before we move on? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 18, County Advisory Boards to Manage Wildlife. Member items, informational. CAB members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda. County Advisory Board items? Seeing none, we will call back agenda item number 12. Legislative Committee Report, Commissioner and Committee Chairman Jeremy Drew for possible action. A report will be presented on the committee's recent meetings. The commission may review bills of interest, consider legislative committee recommendations, and may take official positions on those bills. The commission may also choose to develop platforms on bills by supporting or opposing general concepts contained within the bills rather than specific language. The commission will consider and may approve a spokespersons who will relay commission positions and platforms to the legislature. Support materials are as of the legislative committee meeting held on January 23rd, 2017. These materials may be updated at the commission meeting based on the outcome of the February 8th, 2017 committee meeting. Bill and BDR language may be viewed online with the website. And just for future, or just for notice, the February 8th committee meeting was canceled. Commissioner Drew.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace. So just a couple of items to cover today, and I'd like to get some specific direction out of the commission on a couple of these. The meeting on the 8th was canceled. Our hope was that a lot of the bills would have been published and out in time for us to provide them as support material, and I think we only ended up with a handful, maybe 4, that were on our tracking list. And so there was a lot going on. We had an overview meeting the next day, and so it was my decision to cancel that meeting. I anticipate with doing so and a lot of the bills coming out after our posting deadline that we'll have a busy meeting the next time the committee gets together. So some background there. To cover today, the committee did recommend spokespeople for the legislature, and I wanted to get approval on that, and maybe that's something we could take first if the chair is acceptable to that and get any sort of public input on it. So we did discuss. Obviously, the legislative session is a busy time. We've got commissioners spread all over the state, and so we discussed the concept of having a designated spokesperson to relay the positions of the body to the legislature, and I somehow got nominated to do that job with Commissioners Wallace and Johnston kind of being the alternates in instances where I'm not going to be able to participate because of conflicts with my schedule. And so the committee recommendation was to nominate myself as spokesperson to relay the positions or platforms of this commission to the legislature, with Commissioner Johnston and Wallace as the alternates. And if we could get some formal approval on that today, I think it would be good, because we're going to start getting into some specific bills and policies, I think, here really soon. Any questions on that? Would you like to take that out to public before we do a motion? Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that out to public comment on that. Is there public comment in Carson City? Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas.
No public comment in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission, and I'm looking for a motion on that section of this agenda item. Commissioner Young.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, as to what Commissioner Drew just mentioned, as to how we would get our message to the legislature of our positions through the various commissioners and their constituents throughout the state, through a process where Commissioner Drew will be the chairperson, with both you and Commissioner Johnson being the alternates.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Commissioner Young and a second by Commissioner Valentine to, I guess to summarize, to designate Commissioner Drew, myself, Commissioner Drew as the primary, and myself and Commissioner Vice Chairman Johnston as the alternate spokespeople. Any questions on the motion? I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Drew.
So now that I've received another assignment, I'll step through some of what we went through. Excuse me. At our committee meeting, there is in your support material kind of a flow chart of Nevada's legislative process. I'm not going to step through that, but if you need a civics lesson tonight before you go to bed, it's just a good frame of reference for how a bill goes from an idea through the different committees and ultimately does or does not become a bill. It pertains a little bit to the next handout, which is the schedule. And there's certain deadlines when bills need to be out of committees or the house that it was introduced in. And so what we've done on the next handout is taken the 120-day legislative calendar, and you'll see in pink some of those deadlines for bills. You'll identify kind of when bills and BDRs are requested, and again, they're being published probably as we speak. And then we've kind of put in our recommended committee meetings in yellow. So we're looking at our next committee meeting on Wednesday, February 22nd, and another one on March 15th. The reason we went for Wednesdays is the natural resource committees in both the Senate and the Assembly meet on Tuesday afternoons. And so we're trying to avoid conflicts if a bill comes up that we need to be present for. We've also plugged in blue kind of our full commission meetings. If you'll recall on the schedule, we do have a telephonic meeting specific to legislative issues scheduled for sometime in April. The committee identified either Wednesday, April 19th or Friday, April 21st as two dates that we may want to consider on that, and maybe that's something we deal with under the future committee or the future commission item. But I don't think there's anything in terms of this that we need approval on, just more making the commission aware of what our schedule is going to look like going forward and how it kind of dovetails in to the 120-day legislative session calendar. Any questions on that? Okay. That brings us to kind of our last item, which is the legislative tracking sheet that we've set up. So Jordan Neubauer, who's not here today, has done a really good job for us in terms of tracking what started out as a whole host of bill drafts and is now slowly becoming more drafted bills in this spreadsheet. And what we're going to try and do is, as a committee, and then as we bring recommendations forward to this commission, is work from this. So what our committee did is we went through the entire list of bills or BDRs that were present that the department had been tracking There's a lot of bills or BDRs that may pertain to the department, but not necessarily us, whether it's, employees, issue with employees, retirement, contracting, things of that nature. And so what the committee tried to do is identify and pull forward those bills or BDRs that we felt would be pertinent to the commission. Just as kind of a disclaimer or FYI, there's a lot of water bills coming forward this session. I think there's 12 or 15 different BDRs specific to water. Obviously, all of those could have some ramifications for wildlife. Some of them may not. So as they come forward, we're going to be at least looking at them as a committee. If we see something that we think influences wildlife going forward, we'll certainly flag it and bring it forward. And one of the bills that we recommended a platform on, we'll discuss today. But that's kind of how we're going to track things. It should be noted that for as fast as the legislature is going to start moving, we're referencing the legislative website to pull bill information. So if you see a bill on our tracking list and a committee platform or position, and you want to see the most current version of that bill, we really are trying to direct people to that legislative website so you can get the most up-to-date version, because the minute we print something or put it on the website is probably in the next minute going to change. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to do that, and if someone has a better idea, I'm all ears. Are there any questions in terms of the tracking sheet or how we're trying to bring bills forward in terms of reviewing them as a committee and then forwarding our recommendations to the commission? Okay. Again, I fully anticipate that the pace is going to step up. If we were in kindergarten on our first committee meeting, we're probably going to be seniors in high school or freshmen in college by the time we get to our next committee meeting. There's going to be that big of a gap. So there were two specific bills that the committee did recommend platforms on. The first is SB 74, and maybe while I'm doing the overview, Deputy Director Rob could pull some of that language up on the screen so folks can see it. But it is one of the water bills. I won't read the entire explanation, but essentially the part that the committee took interest in was the part that says providing for the collection of rainwater under certain circumstances. And then there's a lot more information in the bill regarding drought and drought planning and drought preparedness. So again, if you look at the language up on the screen, it reads that precipitation may be collected without a water right, from rooftops of a single-family dwelling for domestic use, or B, in a guzzler to provide water for use by wildlife, by the Department of Wildlife, the Bureau of Land Management of the United States, of Department of Interior, or the Forest Service, of the Department of Agriculture, if precipitation collected does not conflict with any existing water right. And so just a little bit of background on this. I think guzzlers have always been a little bit of a gray area in terms of we've been able to install them without needing a water right, but it's never been completely clear, is my understanding, in water law. So the platform that the committee is recommending on this bill is that we support the concept that guzzlers do not need a water right or approval by the state engineer in order to collect rainwater, but we did want to request clarification on how a potential conflict would be determined, and then we took no further position on the balance of the bill. So the question that arose is that last line. It says, if the precipitation collection does not conflict with any existing water right. And I guess the question the committee had is, if you're not going to require a water right, who actually would determine that conflict? And so we're seeking some sort of clarification on that. So that's the recommended platform from the committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and maybe again we take pause here for public comment in case someone wants to speak specifically to this bill before we formally adopt a platform as a commission. Questions?
Seeing no questions from the commission, I'll take it out to public comment in Carson City. Public comment in Carson City. Come on up, Sean.
Sean Shea, Washoe County. Just for myself, I would just want to make sure, because on the Sheldon, I don't see, I see the Department of Interior, but it's set up under the BLM. Should there something for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in there? Because there is some on the Sheldon. I just want to make sure everything was covered. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Further public comment in Carson City? Coming up, Paul.
For the record, Paul Dixon Clark. Just a thought I had, like Sean just had, is where we're talking about our position on the Air Force and the Navy taking over tracts of land where we have guzzlers right now and doing things. How does that play into this bill, Jeremy? Where I know there's jurisdiction owns or has overseeing, and does it play into this where where we have active guzzlers on mountain ranges right now, and if they take over that mountain range, how do we access, because they would be yet other entities in this, is all as what Sean said. Thanks.
Commissioner Drew, do you have a?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is probably a good point and something we can certainly raise, whether that's in our platform or not. We can certainly adopt that into the platform. In terms of withdrawal lands, I don't know that this bill is going to speak to that. I mean, it's pretty specific to water rights and water law. And so I don't think there would be an influence one way or the other on a withdrawal land. I don't think there's anything we could speak to in this bill on that. Yeah. Good question. Good point.
Further public comment in Carson City? Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas?
No public comment in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission.
I would make a motion that we support the committee recommendation to adopt a platform on SB 74, that we support that wildlife guzzlers do not need a water right or approval by the state engineer to collect rainwater, and to request clarification on how a potential conflict would be determined, and remain silent on the remainder of the bill, in addition to making sure that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service guzzlers would fall under the same category.
Second that.
A motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Commissioner Young to support the stance on SB 74. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the second bill that we looked at as a committee was SB 75. This is an act relating to wildlife, revises provisions relating to the confidentiality of certain information obtained by the Department of Wildlife, revising provisions governing the preparation and dissemination of certain reports and statements concerning the Wildlife Trust Fund, the Dream Tag Program, upland game bird projects, and certain energy development projects, eliminating the requirements for publication in newspaper of notice of meeting related to certain orders and regulations by the Board of Wildlife Commissioners, and providing other matters related thereto. The portion of this bill that the committee was most interested in was that provision on confidentiality. Essentially, our recommended position or platform is to support the confidentiality portion of reporting parties. And maybe Deputy Director can speak to the language that's up on the board. The committee did suggest remaining silent or at least neutral on the rest of the bill. I think primarily it's the department has been provided direction to clean up some of their reporting requirements and try and go towards being a little bit more paperless. So Deputy Director, if you'd like to address this one, or Director Wasley maybe.
I will. Thank you, Commissioner Drew. This bill does several things, keeping our comments specific to the section that's up on the board. The department has to comply with public records request law to provide information when issues are reported. There's only a small amount of information that can be redacted from those reports presently, Social Security numbers. We've had several issues where individuals have not called us, reportedly not called us, or after they've contacted us, have asked us to please stand down due to conflicts with neighbors. What we're looking to do is to protect personal information and encourage people, if they need assistance, to to be willing to call us for help. A couple scenarios that come to mind. Certainly, wildlife conflicts in an urban situation. You may have one neighbor who's putting food out. Granted, there are laws against wildlife feeding, but some people in Las Vegas are feeding coyotes, for example. The neighbor may hate them, may have small pets that have been killed or could potentially be killed. We have situations where we have people that have significant investments in their landscaping. Spring Creek is one of these scenarios where you may have one resident that has $20, $30, $50,000 invested in landscaping. The adjacent neighbor may have food out where deer come in. If that individual with the landscaping has a conflict with that neighbor, wants to call and say, hey, somebody's feeding these deer illegally, they're reluctant to do so if we are required to provide their personal information. So we're looking for opportunities to protect that personal information and encourage people to contact us so that we can intervene in a way that would potentially keep animals from crossing roadways or damaging property or prevent the illegal feeding. So it's simply a way that we want to protect reporting parties in fulfillment of our mission of upholding the law and keeping both people and animals safe.
Thank you, Director Rosley.
I guess I was just ask if there were any questions on the bill or the committee's platform before we open it up for public comment.
Seeing none from the commission, I'll take it out to public comment in Carson City. Come on up, Mr. Moldy.
Mr. Chairman, Don Mulderino. I'm just wondering if that blue section should then read any personal information obtained by the department. It seems to me that another side of this coin is that the department in the past has, at least on occasion, taken either a phone call from someone alleging problems with a bear or bears, or perhaps even just a casual conversation somewhere in the Tahoe region that somebody's complaining about a bear having done something, and there's no paper record of whatever the substance of the complaint was. And it seems to me that given the controversy that's gone on for a long time regarding this matter, that the department has some obligation to have a written record of some kind about every complaint that comes in that results in some action with a bear. It only seems reasonable to me that that would be the case. That information doesn't necessarily have to include the reporting person's or the complainant's name or personal information, but it seems to me the public has a right to know what kind of information results in actions against bears. I don't think a phone call to the department alleging some sort of bear activity without a written record is sufficient. The person complaining can certainly be protected, but there ought to be some indications to what that information was, what sort of damage, where did it occur roughly, if not at a specific address. We need to know that information in order to try to diminish the amount of rumor and speculation, conspiracy theory, and so on that goes on around this stuff. So my suggestion would be that you amend that to include the word personal as the second word in the blue section. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moldy. Further public comment in Carson City? Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Jana Wright, for the record. In section 1, I personally feel that there should be an exemption for law enforcement or animal control to have access to quote unquote confidential information. It might impact them being able to assist, or we get calls about problems and section 5, bullet point 6, line 32. They are, on line 34 and 35, they're deleting about any information on the registration of a trap, etc. They shall not, the department shall not disclose that information unless required to do so by law or court order. I'm confused on why that would even be deleted. And that's my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Further public comment in Las Vegas?
No further comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bring it back to the commission.
Just to maybe address this a little bit, and maybe Commissioner Johnston could help me, or even Commissioner Hubbs, but I think to Mr. Moldy's point, this section 1 reads, any information obtained by the department or agent of the department concerning a person who has requested assistance. I could see where adding personal in there would maybe clarify, but I think it's also redundant. I think the language at this point speaks specifically to a person. I'm not so sure it speaks to confidentiality of the information that's been provided, but I don't know if the department had any thoughts on that, or if I'm misreading that, if any of my committee members could chime in on that.
Well, that was the exact note that I wrote down, that what is, under this statute, what is deemed confidential is the information concerning a person who has requested assistance or reported something. So the information providing on the incident or the base, I thought it was on. It's on. I'm usually not told to speak up, but I'll speak up. So I think it's already in the statute that the only information that remains confidential is the information that's concerning the reporting party, not the actual incident that prompted the report.
I guess I would also point out that the committee recommended platform says to support the confidentiality of those reporting parties who report nuisance wildlife claims. So even our platform is specific to those parties and not necessarily the information. Probably a good clarification.
Director Wasley?
I would just like to add that the department has no desire or intention of keeping the details of the specific incident confidential. It was to protect reporting party solely.
Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Director Wassley, maybe I missed it somewhere along the way. Does the department respond to anonymous complaints?
Yes and no. Certainly, if there's an issue of public safety that warrants investigation, regardless of whether or not a reporting party identifies themselves, I think us having knowledge of it requires some action. So yes, even though it excuse me, could be anonymous, oftentimes there's dialogue, there's exchange to try to understand the situation, location, history, that if somebody wishes to maintain anonymous, they're not necessarily willing to engage at that level of discussion. And so we have several instances across a myriad of species throughout the state where when we are finally engaged, whether it's one neighbor after another, whether it's the bear situation, a coyote situation, a deer situation, oftentimes we're told, well, I didn't want to upset my neighbor, or I didn't want to be the one, and a lot of that stems from the availability of that personal information. And so we're trying to encourage people to give us the opportunity to become involved sooner rather than later.
Further questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Drew?
If you're ready for a motion.
I am.
Okay, I would move that the commission adopt the recommended platform of the committee in regards to SB 75 to support the confidentiality of those reporting parties who report nuisance wildlife claims and remain silent on the rest of the bill.
I second that.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Commissioner Hubbs to support the platform of the committee for SB 75. Any Questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 9-0. Commissioner Drew?
I believe that's all I had to report from the committee at this time. Again, as you'll see in terms of the bill and BDR tracking list, there'll be a lot more information coming forward at subsequent commission meetings, and we'll probably need to schedule as such. But I appreciate the commission's indulgence today. Again, if there's ways we can improve bringing forward a position or a platform from the committee and to the commission by board members or cabs or public, I'm all ears on that. So I look forward to moving through this. It's going to get a lot more busy. And I would just remind the commission that we do have one other previously adopted platform. The BDR wasn't out yet, but that was specific to the license simplification and our general support of the concept. So that is a platform that's not on this tracking sheet, but it certainly will be added when that BDR bill comes forward. And I think since our support material was put together, that has happened. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Drew. We'll move on to agenda item number 13. First reading, Commission Policy 26A, Transparency. Division Administrator Brian Wakeling for possible action. The Commission will conduct a first reading of Commission Policy A, Transparency, and may take action to amend or repeal the policy as outdated and unnecessary. Mr. Wakeling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Brian Wakeling, Game Division Administrator. There's been a couple of things that have kind of been developing that certainly affects Commission policies, which is certainly why the Commission looks to review those policies on a regular basis. During the last legislative session in 2015, Senate Bill 417 was adopted. That Senate bill essentially provided protections, again, dealing with some of the public records requests for specific locational information for wildlife. What it does is provide a one-year protection, provides protection for wildlife, so we don't wind up releasing sensitive information immediately before a hunt, immediately during a sensitive time of year for a particular species that lacks of sage grouse or something of that nature. Consequently, after the adoption of that particular piece of legislation, we kind of put a direct conflict with this policy in that we would present our survey data on the website immediately following. Additionally, we're going through an awful lot of effort trying to simplify, standardize, and maintain the transparency of the processes we use, specifically regarding our harvest information. We publish the data, specifically right before our season set time frame. Big Game Status Report has the summary information of all the data that's associated with it. Anybody that's interested in any of the detailed information without access to the actual location data certainly has access to that. Based on that review and the input from that Senate bill, this commission policy certainly is in need of revision, and the department ultimately deems it is probably no longer necessary. And so that's why the department's recommendation would be for the commission to consider this.
Thank you, Mr. Wakeling. Any questions? Commissioner Drew.
Mr. Wakeling, and you may be able to answer this, or director, deputy director, but under procedure, it talks about the department will post on their website the certain information, and I agree. I think there was a bill that passed last session that in some cases would conflict, but it's my understanding that any of this information could be requested from the public at any time through a public information request, and then we could pull out the information that I think is pertinent to the bill that passed last session. Am I misrepresenting that, or is that in fact the case?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, that's completely accurate, and in fact that is essentially something we do currently. It was something that occurred prior to this meeting.
It's really, excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chairman, it's really the specificity of the location data. And part of this is driven by some of the technological advancement in GPS collars. We certainly are willing to share as much as we can without putting those animals at jeopardy. Excuse me. So whether it's specific geographic information as to where all the 6-year-old or older rams were surveyed, using a GPS and a helicopter, or having animals equipped with GPS collars that can provide exact coordinates on 15-minute intervals, we feel that a year is an adequate time frame to protect the specific locations of those, so that information can't be used to impact or affect any of those animals.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, an example of exactly what Director Wosley was referring to in the fall of 2014, and it was a very memorable public records request that we received. At that time, it specifically spoke to that this individual had a ram tag in a particular unit, and the surveys were occurring just before the hunt, and he specifically requested the location of the GPS locations of all Class 3 and 4 rams observed within the unit.
Further questions from the commission? Seeing none, this is an action item. I'll take it out for public comment in Carson City. Thank you, Mr. Wakely. Seeing no public comment in Carson, got one coming up.
Morning, Craig Burnside, Douglas Cab. At our meeting, the time of our meeting, we were going under the assumption that this was being looked at be repealed because the policy was in conflict with the law that had passed since, and so it was no longer compliant with NRS. In this day and age, we questioned, repealing something that promotes transparency. And so at our meeting, we voted to recommend to you that you reword policy 26A to bring it into compliance with the current NRS.
Thank you. Further public comment? One up, Dr. Lynn.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Gerald Lent with Nevada Hunter Association, and I would like my entire written comments put into all the distributed minutes of the meeting, and I'd also like to ask the commission if I may respond to any department comments after my testimony. I am opposed to repealing Commission Policy 26A, which is a transparency policy. NDOW is constantly asking the public and sportsmen to trust their biologist. In order to gain that trust, NDOW must disclose their information and source of information. If the Department of Wildlife asks for a blind trust, it will lose its integrity and will not be believed. Transparency is important if you're going to ask sportsmen to buy in. When NDOW makes a decision, the public has a right to know why and how they made their decision. The best way to disseminate this information is all on their website. This lack of transparency is what got NDOW in trouble with their big game tag draw system. No transparency, and certain people were doing what was called fraud and abuse. And the tag draw system was taken away from NDOW and went to a private contractor. None of you were around, but you should read the legislative audit. And the legislative audit this is because there's no transparency. When we tried to go down and look at the draw system, we told we couldn't do it. It was done at 2 in the morning in a basement with some computer that no one ever looked at. And the audit says they were fraudulently issuing big game tags. It goes on, and it's something that if you're really interested in transparency, you should read this. The random draw numbers was determined in advance. Everybody knew what the random draw number was. People that had a fishing license got big game tags, and they incorrectly gave tags to people of the preference system that didn't have preference, and they had preference, according to them. And it goes on and on. It says it could also result in the Department of Wildlife employees issuing tags to hunters of their choice without regard to the results. Nobody was looking. There was no transparency involved on it. It goes on and on. And this is why the legislature took the tag draw away, and it's available for anyone, and none of you guys were around. I was. And it's real interesting to read why important transparency is. And in a Paul Dixon court case suing the commission, when I was on the commission, one of the recommendations from the judge was to increase transparency on heritage projects. The judge wrote the commission didn't give enough information on heritage projects and told us as a commission we need to prevent these problems in the future. And it's case number 10EW00261B, Department 2. And I'm going to read just what the judge says. And the judge says the commission approved applications which did not include maps and legal description. And he said, he also said, the judge said, and this is very important, I think, he said that the court doesn't like to get involved in these cases, but if the public is harmed, they will certainly get involved in them. And it says courts can and will interfere when it is made apparent that discretion has been abused. And so reduced transparency will open the Department of Wildlife to increased litigation. And that's straight from a court case. And even though the department doesn't like to give all the information out to the public in the cabs, it is best then to let the cabs come to the commission to disagree. For example, there are no deer in one area, etc. And with the cab's proof, they can make an argument why this should be changed. Transparency is best. Another example, when the director says the deer estimate is obtained by tripling the deer seen from helicopters and aerial surveys, county cabs might disagree. Like the director says in his newspaper article, the number of deer, 109,000, is arrived by tripling the deer seen from helicopters and aerial surveys. The cabs might have something to say about that. And with the transparency and how they get the numbers, you'll hear some disagreement, which you're going to hear today probably on some of the recommendations. In conclusion, the public and sportsmen need and have a right to know how public officials are conducting their business. Transparency matters. I am here today because sportsmen believe government operates best under transparency. Transparency builds trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lent. Further public comment in Carson City?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Don Muldy, Reno. This item reminds me of our discussion yesterday about quotas and harvest guidelines. And I think that I agree with one of the CAB members who spoke that the department should probably have some kind of a policy on transparency, whether it's this one or some other one or something, because that concept is somewhat current in our political life. I think part of what generated this policy in the beginning was some skepticism on the part of some hunters in this state as to whether the department's deer number populations were correct and how they were arrived at. So there was a question as to how the population numbers were determined. I've had the same concern specifically regarding bobcats for decades. How the bobcat season recommendations are arrived at and based upon what population is being assumed has been probably the most opaque area of your business that I've been involved in for a long time. I have never understood nor been provided access to any part of the deliberations that go into making a season recommendation. And to me, I should be able to have some access to that. I'm aware there's freedom of information opportunities, but it seems to me that population status of animals that are being killed, particularly trapping where there are no quotas, this population estimate and how it relates to season recommendations should be available in some fashion as part of a transparency policy, or perhaps if we want to badger you with freedom of information stuff. Similarly with the mountain lion, I'm very concerned about the mountain lion. I read in your information that there is a formula for determining lion populations in this state. I have never seen it. I have asked for it before. I don't know why it can't be part of a transparency effort so that we can know how the recommendations are based and what population status we're talking about. So I think that the quota thing and population estimates dovetails into this transparency issue that you're talking about. So I would like you to continue with a transparency policy of some kind and keep the stuff in mind that we've talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moldy. Further public comment in Carson City? Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas.
No comment in Las Vegas, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Vice Chairman Johnston and
Yeah, I have, I guess I take issue with the stated basis for repealing this policy. The department said that the legislature amended 503-010 to preclude the release of specific locational information for 1 year after collection, and when I read the statute, that's not what the statute did. It doesn't preclude the dissemination or release of information. The statute says it's unlawful to use such information in taking any game mammal. It specifically says in 503-010 subsection 6C, it's unlawful to use any location information obtained from records maintained by the department within 1 year after the date on which the information was collected to harass or take any game mammal, game bird, or other wildlife. So I don't see how the statute precludes the department from releasing information. What it prohibits is the use of such information to take a game mammal. So I'm not convinced that the statute, as it was adopted, requires abandonment of this transparency policy.
Deputy Director Rob, did you have something?
I do all the public records requests for the department, and one thing we strive for is to be transparent. Some of the data we're trying to protect is we have a Gila monster study going down in southern Nevada. Their home range is very small. We have transponders on them that aren't satellite, they're VHF. People get those frequencies and then go take their buddies out to see our Gila monsters. That is harass. We don't want that type of information out there. If you look at the bear situation, if we trap a bear in Lake Tahoe, we put out all the information about that bear, where it was trapped, size, weight, sex, age, tag number, color of tag, everything associated with that. The only thing we don't put out is the location that we release that bear. But we have a log on the website that shows every bear that we've touched. When I hit that 1 year period from when we released that bear, I put that information out, what the release site was. We strive to maintain transparency in every instance, but maintain the integrity of our data and the wildlife. We're really trying to protect wildlife, not the data. So all of our information is available, whether it's a count, whether it's numbers, 100% of it's available. We're just trying to protect the wildlife for a 1 year period so they can live in their natural setting and have ability to not be harassed immediately after that information is obtained. And that's what this is trying to get to.
Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, I think we've got several issues with the policy as it stands now, and I'm not so sure that I favor a complete repeal of the policy. I think a policy on transparency is good. I think it should incorporate what Deputy Director Robb has stated, some of the concerns that Commissioner Johnston has stated, some of the public input we've received. But not only do we have a numbering issue with this policy, if you'll recall, it overlapped with the elk, but I think we've got a scope issue with this. It's interesting to me that at the time, we felt that this should only apply to quotas for ungulates. And I'm not so sure that this meets the mark. And so kind of what I'm leaning at this point is maybe a suspension of policy 26A until such a time that we can develop a new transparency policy under a new number.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate that thought. The thing that stood out to me is that it is very specific to ungulates. And if I work for a public agency, and I can tell you that the expectation to post every last bit of data out there that's obtained in some kind of a timely manner. Director Wasley talked about yesterday not having the resources to do some branding for the agency, that kind of stuff. I'm telling you, I know what kind of resources go into maintaining a website, uploading the information. People are never satisfied with it. It's always outdated. It's not in the place that it needs to be. There's a lot of issues with it, and I'm not making arguments for not being transparent. I'm just saying that there's a reality on the other side that our agency, and I imagine that the department might be in a similar situation. You can't win for losing. I mean, you put it all out there, and there'll be something wrong with the way that it was presented, or it's outdated. The maintenance aspect of it. There's always a timeliness issue of it. So for me, this had nothing to do with whether the records are available or not. The records are available, less the stuff that's redacted as part of any request. The records are there, and the information is available, and the public can ask for it. We go through it all the time. So I'm trying to balance that, meeting the expectations of the public and being able to get to that information in a process where they can do it on their own time. They can pull it out. I understand that. I get that. We all appreciate that. With the concept of having it available for them in a form or a timeliness that they want. To me, there's a balance there that we have to strive for a little bit. I don't like the specificity of the thing. If we're going to put it all out there, let's put it all out there. I mean, the data that's out there for we're talking ungulates. Why not transparency on everything else, like Commissioner Drew said? I completely agree with that. That opens up the data that the department maintains. I guarantee you is extensive. I don't know if the system could even hold it all, but anyway. So I think, if we need to have a further conversation, I would support that. But I'm definitely not supportive of one that's just specific to one particular aspect, and may very well just be in the interest of a handful of armchair scientists trying to question everything that the department's doing. I don't know. I don't know what prompted this whole thing.
Commissioner Valentine.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace. Might this be a policy that needs to go back to Policy and Procedures Committee, review and update, and then bring back to the Commission?
I think that may have been the direction that Commissioner Drew was alluding to, and I'll finish with comments from the commissioners, and then we'll maybe look at that. Commissioner Allenberg.
Yeah, I would just be in complete agreement with Commissioner McNish and Commissioner Drew.
Commissioner Young.
Likewise with me, Mr. Chair.
Further commission comments? Commissioner Hubbs?
Yeah, my thoughts were actually in alignment with Commissioner Drew. I do think, obviously, the department has a major responsibility in protecting our wildlife. Unfortunately, I mean, this is an executive arm of the executive, right? They're doing their management, but they're also in charge of enforcement. And unfortunately, sometimes data can be used to harm wildlife. And I think they have a duty to keep some of that confidential. And I think a year is reasonable. But looking at the policy too, for transparency's sake, to having the public depend on numbers that are being supplied to them, I think it is important to report, and I do also support expanding a policy for all species that they manage for.
Commissioner Olberg?
On some of these species, a year may not even be sufficient. You know, they may be just such homebodies that they're still there. They're in the very general vicinity as they were a year ago. And so it may have to be species specific, you know.
Commissioner Hubbs?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, especially with they were talking about the Gila monsters. I mean, you may never want to really report some of that information because it's just too sensitive. I think there can be cases made for that.
Director Wasley?
Yeah, guess I would like to maybe follow up on Commissioner Hubb's comment. There are a lot of location data that we view as sensitive, including sage grouse leks, raptor nest, bat hibernacula, reptiles that have very small home ranges. And this transparency policy, I think, is well-intentioned. I don't know that it is unique from the public records request process. And to Commissioner McNitch's point, that data is available. The specific location data, I think, is where our largest concern lies. And when this policy says all survey data, to us, location data is part of all survey data. Certainly, as I mentioned earlier, the increase, the technological advancements, the increase of military technologies into civilian life, including in satellite tracking, collars, and excuse me, if people have ready access to that, they can get a location of a ram or a buck every 15 minutes. We're trying to not be secretive. We're not trying to avoid transparency. We're simply trying to protect some of those wildlife resources that we're charged with protecting.
We're not taking public comment at this time. Further commission comments? Commissioner Hubbs?
So just to clarify, we're thinking about sending this, or actually having our Policy and Procedure Committee revise and revamp this policy versus repealing it, but in the meantime, perhaps suspending it until it has been revised.
That has been the discussion, but Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning, and I'd be ready to provide a motion if we're ready for that.
I think we're ready for that.
Okay, I would move to suspend policy 26A until such a time that it can be revised under a new number and consistent with current NRS for all wildlife data.
I have a motion by Commissioner Drew and a second by Commissioner Olberg. Was there any directive in that to send it back to the policy committee, or? I think we'll just assume that.
Yeah, I think that's why we have the policy committee, and I think that's probably the best way to proceed with it. The other thing I would point out is I believe this is the first of 2 readings, and so this recommended course of action will go back out to the public and the county advisory boards, and I think hopefully it'll clarify a little bit that we're not opposed to transparency, but we need to clean up what we're doing and expand the policy, because quite frankly, I think it completely misses the mark as written now.
Any questions on the motion from the commission? Hearing none, I have a motion on the floor. I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously 9-0. Is the flavor of the commission for a break or to jump right into the regulations? Keep going. All right. We'll move on to agenda item 19A, Commission General Regulations Adoption for Possible Action. Public comment allowed. Persons wishing to provide comment on regulations are requested to complete a green regulation speaker's card and present it to the recording secretary. Commission General Regulation 464, Appeals, LCB file number R074-16, Administrative Procedures, Regulations and Policy Committee Chairman and Commissioner David McNinch for possible action. The Commission will consider adopting amendments to Chapter 501 of the Nevada Administrative Code. This regulation revises provisions relating to practice before the Commission. It provides more efficiency of the in scheduling appeals will define that calendar days are used for calculation of deadlines and more clearly notify the appellant in advance of a hearing that the commission has limited jurisdiction. It will also provide for two separate attorneys general, one for the commission, one for the department, to avoid conflicts, with one attorney advising two sides of the appeal. It also requires the appellant to give the agency advance notice of legal representation to improve scheduling for a separate, lengthier time needed on agendas. Commissioner McNinch. Oh, I'm sorry, there's more. These changes were provided at the May 12th, 2016 meeting of the Board of Wildlife Commission's APRPC committee, which included relevant suggestions from the public and legal counsel. The commission held a workshop in Reno on August 12th, 2016, where the commission asked to include information regarding the notice to the appellant and also to insert language that if a party fails to file certain information within 14 days, they may waive their right to a hearing on the appeal. A revision of the regulation was requested from the Legislative Counsel Bureau, which contained additional edits. No changes were suggested by the commission at the November 19, 2016 meeting. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you've summarized it pretty much. It's in the write-up. You've gone over the purposes, what we were trying to accomplish with it. And we've heard it several times, and I think we're to a point where we probably are in pretty good shape unless there's something new that's come to the table.
Questions or comments by the commission before I take it to public comment? Seeing none, I'll take it to public comment in Carson City. Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas.
No public comment in Las Vegas, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve CGR 464 appeals, LCB file number R074-16 as presented.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Commissioner McNinch and a second by Commissioner Young to approve I've got a mix up here. General Regulation 464, LCB file number R074-16 as presented. Questions on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to Part B, Commission General Regulation 467, Special Assistance Permit, LCB file number R105-16, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for possible action. The Commission will consider adopting amendments to Chapter 502 of the Nevada Administrative Code. Through Assembly Bill 136 of the 2015 legislative session, the Nevada State Legislature mandated the Board of Wildlife Commissioners to adopt regulations prescribing the circumstances under which a person may assist a licensed hunter with certain disabilities in the killing and retrieval of a big game mammal. The Commission held a workshop on this regulation on August 12, 2016, where several changes were considered. The Commission held another workshop on September 23, 2016 to consider public comment and the changes that were implemented at the last meeting. Chief Game Warden Turnipseed.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, members of the Commission, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for the record, and your introduction summed it up perfectly. This regulation is in response to Assembly Bill 136, which made changes to the Commission's authority and mandates in NRS 501-181. Those changes were to give the Commission the authority to adopt regulations prescribing the circumstances under which a person, regardless of whether the person has obtained a valid tag, may assist in the killing and retrieval of a wounded big game mammal by a person who is A, paraplegic, has had one or both legs amputated, or suffered a paralysis of one or both legs, and has a valid tag. If you'll remember those discussions, basically what we came up with in regulation in response to this NRS change was coming up with a SLAP permit, a special license and permit, that would authorize a disabled hunter that has one of these disabilities to designate an assistant who would be able to assist that disabled person in retrieving a wounded animal or retrieving a harvested animal. This regulation was drafted and worked up by Captain Mike Maynard, so I'll hand it over to him, and he can answer any questions or go over some of the highlights of it. Like you said, it's been workshopped a couple times. I think the last time was in September, and then it went back to LCB, and the current version that you have in front of you is the draft that came back from LCB.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I guess the best way to do this would be to read through the entire NAC as it currently is written and returned to us by LCB. With your indulgence, I can do that for you, or would you like me to just do a summary?
I think a summary would be fine.
Okay. If you'll follow along in the department memorandum, I'm gonna, on our white paper, I'll go over some of the sections real quick and stand for any questions if you have any. Basically, as Chief Turnipseed and yourself said, the AB 136 amended 501-181 subsection 9. The proposed new addition to NAC 502 has 8 separate sections. Sections 1 through 5 are the new NAC entirely. Sections 6 through 8 are amendments to existing NAC. The bulk of the material, which I think you'll be interested in, is sections 1 through 5. First section basically delineates that Chapter 502 of NAC will be amended to include this regulation. The second section defines what a designated licensed assistant as somebody who assists the holder of a special assistance permit in accordance with the regulation. The third section defines that a person issued a special assistance permit is someone who meets the requirements of Section 4, which covers what they would need to get that permit. The fourth section, Part 1, details under what conditions a tag holder may be issued a special assistance permit. And those conditions are basically what was outlined in AB 136. Paraplegic, one or both legs amputated or has suffered a paralysis which severely impedes walking. The fourth section, which is Part 2, covers what information is required on the special assistance permit. This would include name, address, social security number, etc. Typical information that we would require for any of our permits. The applicant must also have a certificate issued by a licensed physician certifying that the applicant has a permanent disability as listed under the regulation. Also, a statement from both the applicant and the designated licensed assistant or assistants would need to be included as well, affirming eligibility for both. Fourth section, Part 3, states that the hunter who has more than one tag must complete a separate application for each tag if desiring a licensed assistant for each tag, meaning each tag stands on its own. If you have a designated, say you have a mule deer tag and a sheep tag, you would need to fill out 2 separate permits that would cover each tag. It's not a blanket permit. Also, the disabled hunter can use different assistants or multiple assistants for each tag if they so desire. The fourth section, Part 4, details the requirements to be a disabled assistant. Briefly, they must be 18 years or older, hold a valid Nevada hunting license, not have any revocations or suspensions per Title 45 of NRS. And as a subnote, there is no charge for this permit. The fifth section is the one that has probably throughout this process had the most controversy, so we'll cover that in a little more detail. Part 1 states that the holder of a special assistance permit must have a copy of the permit in their possession while in the field. This is typical of most hunting requirements. It also states that the holder of a special assistance permit may be accompanied by more than one designated licensed assistant listed on the permit, but, and this is a key part, may only be actively assisted during the hunt by one assistant at a time. Meaning you're not going to have, and this was a concern with many people in the public as well as the commission, that you only have one person that's potentially going to be out there shooting at one time at an animal. It's not going to be a flock shooting event with 5 people trying to shoot one deer. The fifth section, Part 2, states that each designated licensed assistant in the field with the holder of a special assistance permit must have a copy in his or her possession, and must exhibit the copy of the permit upon demand of any officer authorized to enforce the Fish and Game laws of the state. Again, that language is typical in other areas of our laws. And it would give the holder that is the assistant something to show the game warden if he had to cross a ridge, for example, or go in an area that was removed significantly from the actual tag holder, to justify why he's standing over a deer that he just shot and he doesn't have a tag himself. The fifth section, section 3, lists the requirements and permitted actions of the designated licensed assistant. These include that they must have a hunting license in possession, and they must use a weapon authorized, and here it says by the permit holder, but basically it has to be authorized by the tag as well. It's not, you don't get extra privileges to use alternate weapons. It has to be a weapon that the tag would have authorized. Special privileges are also given to the designated licensed assistant that they may in good faith discharge a weapon to assist in the taking of big game mammal lawfully wounded by the permit holder, validate and attach per NAC the tag of the permit holder, and retrieve the big game mammal wounded or killed by the permit holder. Fifth section, part 4 states that for purposes of Title 45, any big game mammal harvested pursuant to this section, the holder of the permit will be deemed to be the person who has killed and harvested it. The fifth section, part 5 states that each holder of the special assistant permit and each designated licensed assistant are also subject to all applicable laws and regulations related to the type of hunt for which the tag holder is authorized. At this point, that's a brief summary of the language we got back as it sits. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions for Captain Maynard? Commissioner Almbert?
Yes, some of the cabs that brought up maybe adding an additional bullet under what constitutes paralysis or a disability. Certainly you wouldn't want to unintentionally exclude someone with a handicap that is not covered by this. Do you guys see any problem with that?
No, again, that was in the actual bill and in the statute, and it would be defined basically by their physician as being either qualifying under that or not.
Commissioner Drew?
So, Mr. Maynard, I appreciate the overview, and I know you guys have done a lot of work on this. Specific to Mr. Allenberg's comments, I guess I look at section 4 on page 2, sub C, and it says, has suffered a paralysis of one or both legs, which severely impedes the holder's walking. I'm just wondering if we couldn't say something more broad, such as has suffered a paralysis of one or both legs, or other clinically diagnosed condition which severely impedes the holder's walking, just to kind of get to some of what the input has been.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the law, actually the statute defines that already, and that would be pretty much what we have to go with.
So it'd be your opinion that the NRS would not allow for addition to that language?
No, and honestly, there is a little, if you're looking for additional, I guess, allowances, that would be a physician discretion that could qualify. Again, I would, personally looking at this, I feel that the LCB would have issue with trying to expand beyond the statutory allowance, because it is that, it's an exception, it's not a rule in and of itself, I would say, or at least that was its genesis, and that a physician has that latitude, I feel, to interpret that. That would be a physician's determination, not our department's determination.
Right, either way, at the end of the day, no matter what the language is, they're going to have a physician's note that meets the intent of the NRS.
Again, through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, that would be correct.
Further comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Valentine?
Captain Maynard, on section 3C, we're talking about being accompanied in the field. It states must be accompanied at all times during the hunt by the holder of the special assistance permit. Is enforcement comfortable with that? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is mirrored in, we have similar language in NRS 502-149, which was brought up when we first started this process. We had to leave a little bit of overly broad language in here as far as how we're interpreting accompanied. There was concerns that we didn't want to put undue restrictions like a stated distance. The interpretation that we're going with for enforcement, and which is, I believe, fairly reliably interpreted from this, is that, number one, the tag holder needs to be in the field. And that is our interpretation of the other NRS 502-149 as well, is tag holder cannot be at home or in camp. They need to be actually actively out in the field hunting. Once that animal has been wounded by the tag holder, then the assistant can basically, their part of the permit goes into effect, and they can go out and do additional pursuit of the animal if necessary, retrieval, validation of the tag, attaching, bringing the animal back, etc. There isn't a really good way to define how far that could be. There's areas, hunt areas, for example, in the Ruby Mountains, where you could be going quite a distance past what any person with these disability restrictions could reasonably even hope to go to pursue that animal over a mountain range perhaps, or into another valley even. And the designated licensed assistant pursuing that animal would still be deemed to be accompanying that person as long as the tag holder was in the field at the time. Again, I've hunted for a vast portion of my life, and I can think of no big game pursuits that go past, maybe a mile or two at best if it was a poor shot. I don't see it going like driving distance, like 30, 40 miles away from the tag holder, which would obviously be interpreted as not being in accompanying the tag holder.
The only reason I ask is I just want to make sure the officers in the field understand that they've got parameters and that everything's going to be okay as far as the assistant and the permittee. No problems ensue.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we're going to make sure that our officers are briefed on the new NAC, as well as what our department's interpretation of that is going to be as far as enforcement, so that there's as little ambiguity as possible. Circumstances are going to dictate how we enforce that. Obviously, there's no way around that. But yes, we will be training our officers to that standard.
Further commission comments or questions? Commissioner Hubbs?
I may have missed this, I'm sorry, but so on that note, if you had somebody, I know this may, or after I've heard some of the stories that do happen, but we all have heard stories about like workers' comp where you have your buddy, he's a doctor, and he writes something for you and so on and so forth. I'm just thinking, what if you did have a friend who wrote that you had partial paralysis and you found some type of violation of this section? What is the remedy, or what do you do to enforce that? What if they do violate this and you find out that it's been fraudulently used?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. That is a possibility, and tag fraud and license fraud and misrepresentation is nothing new. We currently do a lot of those investigations for just the standard hunting privileges and tags. There is obviously a potential for that, that a physician could fraudulently issue a certificate, which would be, I assume that's what you're referring to. As the law is written, we pretty much have to rely upon the integrity of the physician and that the medical process that evaluates whether somebody is disabled or not. Could there be an abuse? Yes. Would we investigate it if we suspected that that was the case? Certainly. There would be other issues potentially involved with medical records confidentialities, that I don't really know that there's a way around that, other than we would just have to pursue it in our investigation possibly. And I'm just speculating. Hypothetically, we could get a warrant if need be, to go in and access some of those records and go through those hurdles if need be. I don't foresee that being a huge issue. Obviously, it could be an issue, and we just deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Further commission comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. I'll take it out to public comment in Carson City.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Doug Martin, Carson City Wildlife Advisory Board. Our board talked about this, and I appreciate the two comments I heard from the commissioners here. And one of them, two of the things we discussed was right at section 4C, where a person has suffered a paralysis of one or both legs, which severely impedes the holder's walking. There may be other afflictions that may impede a person's walking. I know I have a friend who has an inner ear balance problem that certainly affects his walking, and I am not familiar enough with the statute to say whether or not that can be included into it. But if it could, I suggest you consider has suffered a paralysis of one or both legs, or has another affliction which severely impedes the holder's walking. So if that could be done, that would be appreciated. And the other thing that we saw, and I understand when I read this that the language says that the assistant must use the firearm or whatever it is in archery of the hunter, but when you read section 5C B, it is clear that may not use a weapon, and I don't like the word weapon, it should be firearm, but should not use a weapon other than the weapon authorized by the tag holder. But then when you go down to D in the very same section, it says that may, and I won't read it all, discharge, when you get to the last part of that particular section, discharge his or her weapon. And I think it might be clearer for the layman, I'm not a lawyer, but it would be clearer for the reader of this if it said instead of his or her weapon, it would say the special assistant permit or the tag holder's weapon. You see, when you say his or her, is that his or her weapon, or is that the tag holder's weapon? And I'd rather, again, still have the word firearm. So, any questions? But thank you for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I think in part of that, I think what it's referring to is it's just meaning the same weapon class. Like if the hunter is using a rifle, then the assistant hunter needs to use a rifle or a bow. And
I agree.
I think that's what it's.
Just one other quick comment. I understand there is an appetite to perhaps expand Section 4 of the proposed regulation, but the enabling statute is quite clear. In 501-181 subsection 9, this commission was directed to adopt a regulation in which a person who is a paraplegic, has one or both legs amputated, or has suffered a paralysis of one or both legs, which severely impedes the person's walking. That's the regulation that the statute directed this commission to adopt. So under the statute as it was adopted by the legislature, I don't think there's room for this commission to expand subsection 4 unless the legislature was to give broader discretion to the commission.
And I understand that, and I appreciate you
I was just wanted to explain that.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Do you interpret that, I mean, the last part of that said a paralysis that, I guess to me it's somewhat permissive language. As a person that's had his neck dug into recently, all 7 discs. I'm losing my ability to walk near as well as I was able to, and it's progressively getting worse, and I've lost all the feeling in my hands. But, I mean, it certainly doesn't prohibit me from hunting at this point, but it seems to me that it does allow for a physician to make an evaluation if this is progressively getting worse. A paralysis has a varying degree, and the word paralysis means a couple different things. To lose the ability to move, it also means to lose the ability to feel. And I don't know that we need to be overly specific with this, but I think an MD that is licensed in the state of Nevada that makes a determination based on our regulation should be able to make a written decision that we could live with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand, but the statute, and it's a paralysis of one or both legs, which severely impedes the holder's walking. So it's not a paralysis of another part of the body that impedes walking. It's the paralysis of one or both legs. That's the way the statute's written, so.
All right, I think I may have steered us off track here a little bit. Let's finish with public comment, and then I'll bring it back to the commission. We can discuss it a little more. Mr. Shea?
Sean Shea, Washoe County. Yeah, we talked about this a lot, and we just thought the way it was written, obviously, you can't be changing it, but what about blindness? I mean, that has nothing to do with, I mean, you can still walk, someone's got to lead you, but if you can't catch up with that animal, does that person still need a special use permit? That other person, which I believe they do. I think it just limits what, you know, I don't like to limit anything on this, so I just, we had a problem with that, so that's why we just wanted to let everybody know.
Thank you, Sean. Further public comment in Carson City?
Craig Burnside, Douglas Cab. At our meeting, we unanimously voted to recommend approval of this. However, one of our members conditioned his I response on the fact, that he thought the regulation should be expanded to include other disabilities that would preclude that hunter from being able to take on the activities that the regulation is set up for. I appreciate your comment, Mr. Johnson. That was how our vote went at our meeting.
Thank you. Further public comment in Carson City? Seeing none, public comment in Las Vegas?
No comment in Las Vegas, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion and a motion. Vice Chairman Johnston.
Just a quick comment. I certainly think I could support a regulation that would be broader to give a broader class of individuals the ability to use the designated assistant. But given the statute as it was adopted, I don't know if we have the authority to do that at this point in time. So I'm comfortable with moving forward with the regulation as presented. And perhaps those who would like to see this expanded, the legislature's in session. So that might be one avenue to express concerns to them.
Further commission comments or questions? Captain Maynard, did you have anything further?
No, I just came up in case you had any further questions.
Okay, thank you.
I had one
Commissioner
question.
Hubbs.
I'm sorry, should we, in terms of broadening the enabling, I did look over that too, but are we able to broaden and do more, or are we constrained by, I'm just wanting to understand that a little bit better through this process in terms of the regulatory framework and when we're being directed to do so by statute.
Thank you, Commissioner Hubbs. Commissioner Johnson, can you elaborate on that? But it's my feeling from Captain Maynard and what we're charged with, I think we're pretty limited to where we're at right now.
My view of it would be if the statute was a little less precise and said develop a regulation in which a disabled individual can use a designated assistant, then we would have that ability to define the parameters of a disability that would qualify for someone, but with the specificity in the statute, I don't think there's much room to go beyond where we're at now.
Captain Maynard?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. During the research for this, I looked at several states and their laws concerning disabled hunter assistance, and there are some really good statutes out there in other states that give a broad definition of disability and what would be covered by an assistant. That would be the route we would need to go, is to get statutory authority to expand that. It's easily, I mean, as far as the template, it already exists in many states. They give broad authority for visual disability, paralysis, inability to walk regardless of cause. I mean, there's any number of disabilities out there, and a lot of states are fairly liberal with issuing disabled assistant permits or something similar to people with a broad variety of disabilities. Specifically to the paralysis part that is listed, if the paralysis, and this would be an interpretation possibly that obviously a physician would have to sign in on, but if you had something in your neck that was causing a paralysis of your legs, for example, as in the example Commissioner Young gave, and a doctor said that yes, that is causing the paralysis in your legs, then it would be applicable under this. Again, statutorily, yes, as we're all aware, we're a little limited on what we can do and the language we can put into an NAC at this time. However, I think that judging by the level of support we've had in the past, that if there was a statute going forward that it wanted to expand this, it could be easily done.
Commissioner Young.
Captain Maynard, I agree with you, and it's nice to know that there's some other states that have a little bigger picture view of this. And I'm going to oppose this simply because I think that if we as a commission were to oppose it based on the fact that we don't believe that it's expansive enough, I know at least in Southern Nevada there's a tremendous number of military veterans coming back from in recent years that have disabilities, that are young men and women that, being that they were in the military and in a war zone, many of them like shooting and they're interested in hunting. And I happen to work with, I got 3 Navy SEALs, recently retired Navy SEALs that work for me. They're very big into this wounded warriors thing, and just being around some of these guys and gals that have these disabilities, I know it's an issue, and it's getting bigger, particularly in the populous area of Southern Nevada where there is a veterans hospital and so on and so forth. I just think we ought to say no and send it back to the legislature since it is in session, for the specific reason that we agree that this needs to be done, but we think that there needs to be a little bigger picture than just paralysis of the legs or an amputation. There are many other disabilities that would preclude somebody, and particularly young people that are looking for things to do in their lives of a positive nature that have a severe disability. Hunting is one of them, and I think Chad Bliss educated all into that, that idea. And so I'm going to oppose this, and I don't know if any other commissioners would join me, but since we are in the legislative session, I would ask Commissioner Drew and his expertise if we can maybe get something changed in that specific statute, as Commissioner Johnson has pointed out, to allow some of these other additional disabilities.
Commissioner Drew. There's one thing I can tell you about the legislature, and that is there are no guarantees. So in my mind, by opposing the regulation that we have before us, I think we could be denying access by those who've already been defined an opportunity. I don't think by adopting this, it precludes us for exploring the possibility of broadening this out legislatively, and I just wrote a note to check with past Commissioner Bliss on that. But in my opinion, I think opposing the regulation we have before us at this point is the wrong course of action, I guess, is to put it quite frankly. I get where you're coming from, but I think we're...
I got a little experience with the legislature.
Turn your mic on, Commissioner Young.
That wants to cut me off. And in my experience, so sometimes you need to get an attention grabber to get that legislature that may say, hey, it will get the attention. But I know, Jeremy, you're right. There's no guarantees there.
Yeah, and I guess I would just say it's been my experience with, the legislative body that when it's something to do with, offering an opportunity to someone with a disability, I don't think you need any extra pizzazz to get their attention. So I'm comfortable adopting this as is.
Chief Turnipseed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess just as a matter of background, I would accept responsibility for the fact that the language is not more inclusive in the statute, because that was my suggestion when we wrote that statute in the 15 legislature. So certainly I think there's room to expand that legislatively, but I just wanted to give a matter of background. Where we got that language was in two other places in statute, 503010 and then 503165. Those are the laws that 503010 allows a person who's paraplegic or has one or both legs amputated to shoot a game animal from a vehicle. And then the 165 is the one that allows an exemption for the loaded gun in a vehicle for those same people. So that's where that language came from. Certainly I think there's room to expand it, but just wanted to give the background of where we borrowed that language.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Johnson.
Yeah, I understand Commissioner Young's point of trying to send a message, but I also feel that, one, we don't know if the statute would be changed. I don't want to hold up a regulation for whom this would for those that this would apply. And secondly, the statute was quite clear on its directive to this commission to adopt this regulation, and I don't want to fail to fulfill that legislative directive and then ask the same legislature to do something different. So I'd like to fulfill it, the legislative mandate that was handed down, and then potentially people can go back to the legislature and say, we did this, and in doing so, the public comment was, this needs to be a little bit broader.
Commissioner Hubbs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great, since we're talking about Jeremy's new position to reaching out to legislature, I think it's great. I think they would be interested in knowing that there was a big need here, at least that we can hear, in expanding that for other disabilities, because certainly there are many disabilities that can impact your ability to track down or, get a loose animal that's been injured.
Commissioner Barnes.
Yeah, I agree that that this does need to be expanded, but I also think we need to get this regulation in place so that we don't lose what we have. So along those lines, I would move to accept this regulation, but ask that it be looked into to expand the definition of paraplegic or the disabilities further so that we can expand it.
On that note, I think it would be good to.
I think that was a motion, so I think we need a second for
okay.
discussion, or.
I just was going to okay, if you, no more comment then on it?
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion.
Okay.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. I was just going to say, when and if it is expanded, I'm hoping that perhaps we put more protective measures in there in case the regulation is willfully violated in some capacity.
Commissioner Allenberg.
Maybe at the same time, if we go to the legislatures, that we look at expanding the same language, this broadened language to the existing two regulations from shooting from the pickup, and to make that language consistent across the board, so that we're not, precluding them for those that we've already extended, to be able to shoot from the vehicle.
Commissioner Allenberg, are you looking for that to be in the motion?
I think the directive's pretty clear, and I'll just caution that there's no guarantee we're going to get an audience, but we will certainly explore the avenues that we have available to us.
Further discussion? Just to clarify the motion, Commissioner Barnes, you were moving to approve CGR 467. Is everyone clear on the motion? I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. At this time, I think we should probably take a 10 or 15-minute break before we get into the season settings, so we'll go till 10:40.